I'm Cheryl, 32, and for years I've tried to believe my family dinners meant home. Tonight, at a long table lit by candles, I reached for that hope one more time. But the seat they left for me was at a corner away from the chatter, like a guest no one invited. Then my father raised his glass and said the words that froze the room. "Find another table." I smiled, but something inside me shifted. They had no idea what was coming next. The clink of cutlery, the smell of roasted turkey, and the low hum of conversation filled the dining room. My parents' house was always immaculate, white linen silverware polished until it gleamed, framed family photos lining the walls, but I had never quite fit into those frames. As I sat alone at the edge of the table, I could feel the invisible line between me and them drawn years ago when I was a scared adopted child trying to belong. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever been treated like an outsider in your own family, hit subscribe. You'll want to see how this ends. Back at the table, my brother passed a basket of rolls to his wife, skipping over me. My mother laughed at a joke only she and my sister understood. I traced a circle on the rim of my glass, keeping my expression neutral. I'd learned long ago not to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. A server placed another dish in front of them. My father lifted the lid dramatically, announcing it was a special gift for family. His glance brushed over me like I was a stranger. I remembered every small slight, birthdays, forgotten achievements, ignored whispered jokes about how I wasn't real family. Tonight, they weren't even hiding it. Across the table, my sister's child stared at me with wide eyes, then looked quickly away. Even children could sense when someone didn't belong. I straightened my back, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The chatter rose, and I could hear my name only in passing, like a footnote in their story. My phone buzzed in my lap with a work message, reminders of the world I'd built outside this house. I silenced it and set it face down. This was their arena, and for now I was still a player in their script. When the main course arrived, the server hesitated, unsure where to place the platter. My father gestured toward the far end, away from me. "Over there, that's for family," he said. The words stung more for their casualness than their cruelty. I reached for my water, my hand steady though my pulse raced. I caught my reflection in the silver pitcher, calm, composed, almost detached. It was the same look I'd worn at every family event, the mask that let me survive their dismissals. Only this time, behind the mask, there was something new, a quiet resolve hardening like glass. As the laughter swelled and forks clinked, I stayed silent, letting the moment imprint itself. Years of exclusion compressed into one evening, one phrase. They thought they knew me. They thought I'd swallow the insult like always. But they hadn't noticed the small envelope tucked inside my bag or the quiet text I'd sent before dinner began. I lifted my glass, taking a slow sip, the cool water steadying me. Around me, the family feast went on, oblivious. My smile stayed in place, polite and unreadable. Inside, though, the air shifted. A cliff edge approached, and they didn't even see it coming. I set my glass down, eyes drifting to the empty seat at the head of the table, the seat my grandmother used to fill before she passed. Her absence was the only thing they truly mourned, because she'd been the glue. Without her, their old patterns had sharpened. Tonight they had shown me exactly where I stood, but what they didn't know was that tonight wasn't just another dinner. It was a line drawn quietly, finally, with no going back. I smoothed my napkin across my lap and waited. Soon the server would return, not just with dessert, but with something else entirely. The smell of cinnamon rolls and roasted meat filled the air, but I tasted nothing. I kept my back straight, my hands folded neatly in my lap like a guest at someone else's celebration. Around me, conversation drifted like smoke trips, planned deals, closed private jokes I wasn't meant to understand. Every sound was a reminder that I'd been invited only to fill a chair, not a place in their hearts. I caught my sister glancing at me, her lips curling into a smirk before she whispered something to our mother. They both laughed softly, shoulders leaning together as if sharing a secret. My father poured himself more wine, ignoring my empty glass. The distance between us wasn't measured in inches, but in years of being the adopted one. A memory flashed my 8th birthday, when I'd been told there wasn't enough cake for me to take a second slice, while my siblings ate as much as they wanted. The same small sting repeated again and again until it became a quiet bruise under my skin. Tonight felt like all those small stings rolled into one sharp moment. I shifted slightly, the chair creaking. No one looked up. It was as if I'd become part of the furniture, useful, but invisible. My eyes found the window where the last glow of daylight softened the edges of the room. Outside, the garden lights flickered on, and I imagined stepping out into the cool night air, leaving them all behind. But I stayed seated, my face calm, my hands still. Inside my purse, my fingers brushed the edge of the envelope again, a tiny, solid anchor. My thumb stroked the sealed flap. Not yet. Timing mattered. I slipped it back and lifted my water, taking a slow drink, letting the coolness steady me. When dessert was mentioned, my brother's wife clapped her hands, excited about the cake she'd brought. For family only, my sister joked loudly and everyone chuckled. I smiled faintly, eyes lowering to my plate. The laughter rolled over me like a wave. They were so sure of the script. A server entered with a silver tray, moving carefully between chairs. For a moment our eyes met, a flicker of recognition, of understanding. He glanced at me, then at the envelope he'd be carrying later. I gave the smallest nod. My father raised his glass again. To family, he said. The others echoed, glasses clinking, eyes bright. I held my glass a second longer before touching it gently to mine, the softest sound in the room. No one noticed, but I did. The air thickened with the smell of coffee, the sweetness of dessert, the weight of their assumptions. My smile stayed fixed, but inside a quiet current pulled me forward. Years of being on the edge had led to this night. I folded my napkins, slowly aligning the corners. Their voices blurred, but one phrase kept echoing in my head. Find another table. They'd said it like a joke, but it was an order they'd been giving me my whole life. Tonight would be the last time. Outside, a car door shut. The sound drifted through the open window, unnoticed by everyone else. I knew what it meant. I let my eyes rest on my father's just for a heartbeat, then looked down again. Calm, silent, waiting. The shift had already begun. They just didn't know it yet. The dinner stretched on each course, another reminder that I didn't belong. Conversation grew louder, the wine flowed freer, and my family's jokes turned sharper. Victoria leaned back in her chair, her diamond bracelet catching the light. Cheryl, she said, voice sweet but loud enough for the whole table. Did you ever finish that little business you started, or did it fold like the others? Laughter rippled around her words. I set down my fork slowly, aligning it with the knife. It's doing fine, I said softly. No one responded. Patricia reached across to pat Victoria's hand. Be nice, she murmured, but her smile stayed fixed on me, cool and polite. Gregory raised an eyebrow. We're just teasing. You're so sensitive, Cheryl. He gestured for more wine, ignoring my empty glass again. The server refilled his without a word. The scent of roasted meat and buttered rolls mixed with the clink of cutlery. My stomach tightened, but I kept eating in small bites. Across the table, Kenneth launched into a story about his latest promotion, his voice swelling with pride. My siblings leaned in eager, and my parents beamed. When he finished, Victoria raised her glass. To Kenneth, she toasted. Everyone clinked glasses. I lifted mine too, the motion automatic, though no one noticed. A flash of memory, me at 15, showing them my first art exhibit at school. They hadn't come. They'd been at one of Kenneth's games instead. That same hollow feeling filled my chest now. I took a sip of water to steady myself. The plates cleared, dessert trays appeared. Patricia glanced at me. You didn't bring anyone tonight, Cheryl, a friend? A boyfriend? She asked, eyebrows arching. No, I said simply. Victoria snorted. Of course not. Who'd want to deal with this mess? More laughter. The server paused behind me, waiting, then moved on. I pressed my palms against my knees under the table nails, leaving small crescents in my skin. Silent. Steady. A faint hum of tension buzzed in my ears. My eyes drifted to Grandma Dorothy at the far end of the table. She sat quietly, but her gaze was fixed on me, sharp and knowing. Our eyes met for a brief moment. She gave the smallest nod, almost imperceptible. Kenneth leaned forward. You're lucky to be here at all. He said, words slurring slightly. Most people in your situation would be grateful. Family dinners aren't cheap." My breath caught, but I let it go slowly. Victoria's laughter rang out again, high and brittle. The server returned this time carrying a silver tray with a single envelope placed neatly on top. He set it in front of me without a word. The chatter dimmed for half a heartbeat, then rose again. I rested my fingertips on the envelope, but didn't open it. Timing. Always timing. Gregory leaned back, looking at me with something like irritation. "You know, Cheryl," he said, voice low but carrying, "we've all done a lot for you. Don't forget who raised you." The weight of their stares pressed down. I smiled faintly, eyes on the envelope, and said nothing. The moment passed, but the tension remained thick as the smell of coffee. I slid the envelope a little closer, its weight small but unmistakable. Around me, the laughter swelled again, Victoria whispering something to Kenneth that made him smirk. Patricia dabbed at the corner of her mouth with a linen napkin, eyes flicking toward me like she was checking a watch. The clink of cutlery had slowed. Even the server hovered at the edge of the room, pretending to straighten glasses. I kept my gaze on the polished wood of the table. Every scratch and swirl of the grain looked like a map of past dinners. I thought of my first Thanksgiving with them sitting at a card table in the kitchen while the real family ate in the dining room, of birthdays celebrated with a quick text, of being told don't make a scene when Kenneth shoved me into the pool at 12. Each memory lined up neatly beside the next like cutlery on the white tablecloth. Across from me, Gregory adjusted his cufflinks. "You still haven't said thank you," he said, his tone falsely light, "for everything we've done. Food school shelter? It wasn't free." His eyes flicked toward the envelope. Kenneth leaned back, stretching. "She's probably planning to stiff us again," he muttered. Victoria laughed, brittle and bright, drawing the attention of nearby tables. My fingers tightened on the edge of the envelope, but I still didn't open it. My smile stayed in place, small and contained. Grandma Dorothy caught my eye again, her expression calm but fierce, like a teacher who knows the answer before the student speaks. I let that steadiness anchor me. Patricia reached for the wine bottle and poured herself another glass. "We're family," she said softly, almost rehearsed. "Families help each other. You should remember that." She raised her glass, but no one clinked. The air in the room shifted, a thin crack running through the polished performance. The server cleared his throat, stepping forward just a fraction. "Is everything all right?" he asked quietly. Heads turned, but no one answered. I smoothed the envelope flat under my palm, the paper warm now from my skin. Inside me, something steadied. Not anger, not yet. Just a quiet line drawn in the sand. I looked up, sweeping my gaze across each face, letting the silence stretch one heartbeat longer than comfortable. Kenneth shifted, Victoria blinked. For the first time all evening, no one was speaking. I still hadn't opened the envelope. Timing, always timing. I took a slow sip of water, set the glass down carefully, and allowed the corners of my mouth to lift just enough to be unreadable. The buzz of the room faded to a low hum. Even the chandelier above seemed to still. Everything was poised, waiting. I finally slid the envelope to the center of the table, the paper whispering against the linen. The sound cut through the low murmur of the restaurant. Every head turned toward it as if I had placed a live wire down between the silverware. Kenneth's smirk faltered. Patricia's fingers froze around her wine glass. Even Victoria's rehearsed grin slipped just for a second. "I'm glad you're all here," I said quietly, my voice carrying anyway. It saves me from repeating myself. I didn't raise it, didn't need to. The quiet around us did the work. I opened the envelope, slowly drawing out a stack of neatly folded papers. Not money documents. The logo of a law firm glinted in the soft light. Grandma Dorothy's attorney, Walter, stepped up from the next table, where he'd been waiting, as calm as a man retrieving his coat. "Good evening," he said to my family, his tone polite but firm. "Mrs. Hayes asked me to deliver this notice personally." He laid a second envelope in front of Patricia. The silence thickened, forks suspended in midair at neighboring tables. "This is a formal notice," Walter continued. "Effective immediately, Cheryl is no longer responsible for any of your expenses. All outstanding bills and debts you've attempted to assign to her are void." Kenneth opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Patricia's face went pale, the practiced warmth draining from her expression. Victoria's knuckles whitened around her napkin. I set down my water glass with a soft click. "I've paid enough," I said simply. "This ends tonight." My voice was steady, almost gentle. Around us, people at other tables began to whisper. Phones were lifted discreetly. Someone was recording. The chandeliers caught the glint of camera flashes. Patricia tried to recover, drawing in a sharp breath. "You can't just," she began. Walter cut her off with a polite raise of his hand. "Actually, she can," he said. "And she has." He opened a folder and placed a single page in front of her. "This outlines the restitution you owe for misappropriated funds meant for Cheryl's care. Legal proceedings are already underway." The sound of Victoria's chair scraping back was loud in the hush. She half rose, then thought better of it, her face blotchy with shock. Kenneth muttered something under his breath, staring at the papers as if they might bite. I didn't move, only folded my hands in my lap, a small, unshakable smile on my face. For the first time in years, I wasn't shrinking at this table. I was simply present, and they were the ones shifting under the weight of eyes and evidence. Across from me, Grandma Dorothy's faint nod was like a gavel falling. The waiter reappeared with the bill, placing it not in front of me, but directly in the center. "Will there be anything else?" he asked softly. Patricia's lips parted, but no words came. The paper trembled under her hand. Patricia's fingers fluttered over the papers as though she could smooth the words off the page. "This is ridiculous," she whispered, but her voice cracked. Kenneth leaned toward her, whispering urgently, yet his eyes kept flicking to the phones pointed at them. Victoria sat rigid, lips pressed into a thin line, the napkin in her hand shredded into a small pile of lint. I stayed still, letting the scene unfold. The sound of silverware clinking, someone clearing their throat at a nearby table, the low hum of whispered gossip, all of it washed over me. For years I had been invisible at family dinners. Now, without raising my voice, I was the center of gravity. Walter placed another document on the table, a single-page summary of the trust and legal filings. "These have already been filed with the court," he said, his tone cool. "Any attempt at retaliation will be addressed in kind." Patricia's hand shot out, grabbing the paper as if she could tear it up. But she didn't. She just held it, staring at the ink, while her face turned a mottled red. Victoria tried to laugh, a sharp sound that fell flat. "She thinks she's better than us," she spat. But the room had shifted. No one at the surrounding tables was laughing. Someone's spoon dropped with a small clang. Even the waitstaff paused, watching. I reached for my bag and took out my phone. "Everything tonight is being documented," I said quietly. "Every word. Every threat. It's over." My fingers didn't tremble this time. Walter stepped back slightly, giving me space. Grandma Dorothy's faint smile at the edge of my vision steadied me. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then Kenneth pushed his chair back and stood, his face a mask of disbelief. "You can't cut us out," he said hoarsely. "We're your family." The word hung in the air like smoke. I looked up at him, my expression calm. "Family doesn't treat me like a bill," I said. "Family doesn't make me pay for the privilege of being humiliated." My words weren't loud, but they landed with a weight I could feel in the room. Around us, the quiet deepened into something heavier, like the pause before a storm breaks. Patricia dropped the napkin she had been twisting. Victoria's eyes darted to the door as though looking for escape. And then, with a small nod to Walter, I rose from my chair. "Enjoy your dinner," I said softly. "This table's all yours now." The scrape of my chair as I stepped back was the only sound. I felt the eyes of the entire room follow me, a slow turning tide. Their power had drained away. All that was left was the check in the middle of the table and the truth written on paper. I didn't look back. The drive back from the restaurant was silent except for the soft hum of the car. Seattle's lights blurred past the window like streaks of gold. Grandma Dorothy rested against the seat, her thin hand still holding mine. Walter sat opposite his phone, buzzing with reporters' questions, but inside the car it felt like a bubble, quiet and steady, a sharp contrast to the chaos we'd just left. Back at the estate, Thomas guided us through the gates, shutting out the flash of cameras waiting at the curb. Inside, the house smelled of cedar and old books. I led Grandma Dorothy to the sitting room where she could rest. She squeezed my hand once before closing her eyes, the faintest smile on her lips. I walked through the hallways past oil paintings and shelves of legal binders, trying to let the weight of the night settle. For years I had left these family gatherings feeling small, ashamed, wondering what I'd done wrong. Tonight I had walked out on my own terms. The check still on their table, the legal papers still in their hands, the eyes of strangers witnessing everything. Those images stayed with me like photographs. Upstairs my phone buzzed again. Dozens of messages, some angry, some pleading. I silenced it and set it face down on the desk. Through the window, Lake Washington shimmered under the moonlight. I opened the window and let the cold air wash over me, a quiet reminder that this life was real now. Downstairs, Walter's voice carried faintly as he spoke on the phone, arranging next steps with the court. Grandma Dorothy had prepared me for this moment, documenting every slight, every exclusion, every dollar stolen. All I'd had to do was stand still and let the truth surface. I took a deep breath and sat at her mahogany desk. My reflection stared back at me from the dark glass of a framed photo, me as a little girl seated at a table's edge, eyes downcast, unnoticed. I reached forward and turned the frame face down. That version of me had done her time. Thomas knocked softly at the door. "Miss Cheryl," he said, "she's asking for you." I followed him back to the sitting room. Grandma Dorothy opened her eyes as I knelt beside her chair. "You did well tonight," she whispered. Her voice was weaker but still firm. No shouting, no spectacle, just the truth. "That's how you win." I rested my forehead against her hand for a moment, feeling the paper-thin skin, the pulse beneath it. She had given me more than money. She had given me a way to hold my dignity. In the quiet of the room, I realized the dinner wasn't the end of a fight. It was the beginning of a different life. Morning light poured into the guest room, soft and pale, touching the edge of the silk sheets. I woke before my alarm, the quiet of the house strange after so many years of noise. Downstairs, Thomas was already at work taking calls for the foundation we had started planning. Walter had left early to file the last motions with the court. Grandma Dorothy slept in the next room, her breathing slow but steady. I moved through the house, barefoot, coffee in hand, looking at the photos on the walls, board meetings, charity events, her with people whose names filled history books. Now she had chosen me, not because of blood, but because she had watched me stand alone and stay kind. On the desk lay a folder she had prepared, initial papers for the foundation, contacts for legal aid, a list of young people already waiting for help. I touched the pages, thinking of the children who wouldn't have to sit at the edge of the table wondering if they belonged. This was the real work, the inheritance that mattered. Later, when Grandma Dorothy woke, I sat with her as she dictated letters to be sent out after her passing, gifts to staff, donations to shelter's final instructions. She paused and looked at me. "Don't let them pull you back," she said softly. "Build forward." I nodded, unable to speak. Weeks passed. The court confirmed everything, the restitution ordered, the media storm fading. Patricia and Gregory moved out of their home. Kenneth disappeared from the news. Victoria's public rants dried up. Each headline felt like a door closing behind me. One crisp afternoon, I stood in the new foundation office downtown. The walls were bright, the space filled with the hum of work. Thomas walked by carrying a stack of folders. A child's laughter echoed from the reception area where we'd set up a play space for visiting families. It smelled of fresh paint and possibility. My phone buzzed with another message from Kenneth, pleading, rationalizing. I typed a single reply and then blocked the number. I didn't feel anger anymore, just a clear line between past and present. Outside the window, sailboats dotted the lake just as they had the night I arrived here, but everything had changed. I pressed my palm to the glass and breathed out slowly. The story wasn't about revenge, after all. It was about building something beautiful while they watched their own power collapse. Silent, steady, undeniable. I turned back to the office, ready to work. The last echoes of that dinner faded long ago, but sometimes I still see their faces in my mind, surprised, silent, unable to reach me. I didn't slam any doors. I simply walked through a new one. Dignity can be quiet, yet it reshapes a life. True worth doesn't shout. It stands and lets the noise fall away.